Well, hello there. Welcome to a brief explanation, or as brief as I can make it, about the story of the Ouroboros Express, which is the current project of Small Loan Studios. I'm Naj, I'm the creative director for this project. I also made an insane mural board, which I will be going through, that can hopefully help explain what the heck we're working on. So welcome! Clearly, art and design is my passion. Let's get started. Firstly, I'm going to just quickly zoom out, and I want to acknowledge that yes, this is quite a lot to look at, right? But if you look at each slide individually, I promise you it's not that overwhelming. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's take a look at the game overview first of all. What we are making is a visual novel slash dating sim. And you may be familiar with some of those, like the ones that I can think of the top of my head, which will show you my tastes are Dream Daddy, My Hatoful Boyfriend, and other classics like that. So this is our version of it, and the pitch is that this is a dating sim set on a luxury train where you can romance characters from diverse origin worlds, choose who to romance, solve the mystery of the Ouroboros Express, and avoid eldritch horrors along the way. So, the pitch, the overview. You are led through a train and there are other monstrous and beautiful guests on the train, and you can't figure out why that is. You realize the train is on a loop, with eerie changes in the scenery and the train that appear with every loop. And you must get off the train, but in order to do that, you must solve the mystery with our fellow passengers before the train is absorbed into the cosmic weave and you disappear into oblivion. So this is a story about grief, connection, and importantly, love. So the tone is meant to be quiet, introspective, hopeful, and deep, but there's absolutely space for brevity. The primary objective is for you to form a true connection with another passenger, and I'll get into that. A secondary objective is to help the other passengers resolve their unfinished business as well. So what the heck does this mean? I think it's useful to talk about what the overarching themes are first before we get into the nitty-gritty. So when I started playing around with this idea in my head, I thought of a train constantly on a loop. And I thought, well, that could, almost be like a vicious cycle. And so what I wanted to think about was, okay, so the passengers on this train are actually in a sort of purgatory or a fancy ferry to the land of the dead, essentially, or whatever comes next. And the train is decaying as they get closer and closer to their destination. So before the end, the inevitable end, they need to resolve their unfinished business. And so there's a couple of things to keep in mind here, which is, so our passengers are on this train, which is limbo, and they need to solve their unfinished business. They need to break cycles of habits that they've perpetuated their whole lives. There's also things around, the stages of grief. So the way our story is structured follows the stages, and I'll go into that in a little bit. And then we have things around empathy or apathy. So our characters can truly be vulnerable and authentic, or they can, have this glossy veneer, or certainly our main character can. But if they choose empathy, she can get what she wants with just emotional connection, but that's scary. There's also things around like having kindness for themselves, forgiveness, and grace, and that applies to all of the passengers on this train. Now, let's get into the good bit, which is talking about our beautiful, beautiful characters. So, our main character, her name is Vivienne Sans Souci. I would best describe her as a glossy veneer of charisma. She's a bit of a social chameleon, but that's masking a desperate kind of loneliness inside. And so her role in this is that she is a reporter and she's been tasked with writing a travel review, as far as she knows, of the Ouroboros Express, the train that she's on. It's a last minute job, so she feels like she doesn't know the details. But then as time goes on, she realizes something's up, something's a bit strange. And so her unfinished business is that despite being constantly surrounded by people, being kind of like a party girl, right? Like she's moved from person to person. She's never been able to experience a meaningful connection. So she's very much from our time and space, to keep it simple, purely because the setting is already so fantastic, and that's extra world building to do if she was from a strange and fantastical world that we wouldn't have to buy into. So she's from our world, our time, our place. Now let's talk about the passengers. We have the Avatar of Asha, the Eternal Light. So she comes from a different world. And she was raised in luxury to be sacrificed when she came of age because she is a physical manifestation, or at least that's the organization that she grew up in, the world she grew up in. They consider her to be a physical manifestation of a goddess. But at the moment of her death, she thought, I want to live, despite being raised her whole life for this one moment. And so she is, she's got some stuff going on. And by the way, we've got links to the full character profiles, so you can go straight into Notion to read the full character profiles. We have our Inquisitor. So they are a mind flayer. They are an inquisitor for I guess for lack of a better term, church of an eldritch being. And for the most part, they live their life seemingly as a paragon of virtue, but they unresolved business as their lack of belief in what they upheld. And so there's some backstory here, which you can absolutely read in Notion. But the main thing is that one key moment to remember about Darius is that he has clean hands, but he can't seem to wash them enough. And that's all I'll say about that. So I'm looking forward for you to read the character profile. We have our best boy, Susura Balrin, the wholesome one of the group, the cinnamon roll. He's a dragonborn who was next in line in the aristocracy in his world, but ran away from their family to be a druid in a nomadic tribe. But their unfinished business is leaving their family behind. So very much like I'm realizing a Simba from the Lion King situation. So do with that what you will. But yes, again, you can read the entire character profile here. So those are our romanceable characters. Now we have our only other NPC, which is the train conductor, the mysterious train conductor. So when I named him after the Sumerian version of the ferryman for the dead, Urshanabi. We've called him Urshu lovingly. He appears as an impeccably groomed man with a cheerful disposition and an artful way of dodging direct questions. So think of him as a kind of trickster as well. He's also there to give tips, point you in the right direction if you're feeling stuck. But he has a secret in that he's a terrible, terrible romantic. You can catch him reading romance novels and smelling flowers. And he's generally kind of rooting for love to happen on the train, or at least some kind of drama. This is his TV. Presumably he's been here a long time doing this job. So, yes. So those are our characters, and hopefully you've got a better sense of who we're playing with here. Now, the other thing I'd love to talk about is the location, the train itself. And the train is kind of a character in itself. So the train is made up of 4 main locations. So we have a lounge, we have a dining and bar, we have an observatory, and we have, at the moment, our main character, Vivian's individual cabin where she can muse on things, she can reflect on things. But as we've discussed, the train is on on its way to a destination where cosmic decay is wearing it down, as our passengers get to where they have to go. So there are kind of cosmic horrors outside of the train. It's safe inside the train, kind of, at the beginning of the journey, but these cosmic horrors basically invade the space, because the veil of the train gets thinner and thinner as the journey goes on. So yes, I came up again. I will stress I did go insane on Miro. I came up with some ideas on the location, so feel free to look at these kind of blueprints when you're writing and have a think about, okay, how would our characters hang out? Essentially, I do. I like thinking about characters hanging out. Okay, so let's get into the story itself. Enough of this talk about characters, even though we're all obsessed with the train conductor. Now, when I say the train is on a loop, that's actually kind of a lie, because the journey of the train is actually a spiral, and on the outside of the spiral is where decay happens, right? So as we start kind of from in the middle here, and we loop around, and the train sort of goes back to a place where we recognize, but then it looks kind of worse. And then there's another day of sorts, and then the train loops around, and then it's kind of worse again. There's weird cosmic eldritch beings, more and more, and it goes around, and then finally we get to where our journey ends. And so this is what I mean by the train is not on a loop, but on a spiral. So let's get into the visualization of the story. Now, there might be some minor differences by the time you watch this and then look at the detailed story breakdown in Notion, but the main story beats are all here. So we have our acts at first. So we have our act that is setting up the crux of the matter. We have an act 2.1, which is denial, and in gameplay terms, it's kind of a mulligan, right? Like, it doesn't have any effect on attraction meters or decay meters, which I'll explain, do not worry. We then have our main gameplay act 2.2, with anger, bargaining, and depression, and this is where the action really happens, right? Where you make the choices as Vivian, to hopefully get her love or seriously fuck up. And then Act 3 is where we resolve everything. So let's get started on Act 1. Now, we meet our main character, Vivi, writing in her journal aboard the Ouroboros Express. And the conductor, a smiling man, Urshu, invites you to dinner with the rest of the passengers. You come because you go to dinner, or brunch, or whatever the meal is, not wanting to be rude, and you're taken by surprise by the other guests. They are literally monsters, or monstrous in form, at least to your eyes, and you decide that you want to interview them and figure out what's going on. So I'm gonna refer to it as you now, by the way. It's you. So you spend the next day getting to know each guest, because, as it happens, you're the only human and you're with a literal dragonborn sun goddess and mind flayer. And in interviewing the characters, you realize none of the guests can remember the specifics of why they're here. You confront the conductor, having figured it all out, and Urshu smiles, our train conductor, and he snaps his fingers, and then you are covered in mist. You and the other passengers have a very dramatic meal, or at least are brought to the dining car, and the conductor congratulates you on figuring out your strange circumstances right on schedule. We suggest tell people, but surprisingly, most of our guests don't take the news of their demise very well, so we sort of ease them into it, you understand. So he explains that the train is a way station of sorts before you are absorbed into the cosmic weave. He points to the sky outside of the observatory, and he says, when all reason fades, your journey will come to an end, but do not worry, dear passengers, your stay will be as comfortable as can be. And, as you might expect, the guests react badly. Someone asks why the charade, and the conductor explains that this is a kindness. Of course, an opportunity to come to terms before the end, and the end is coming. So he bids you all a good night, mist fills your vision, and the train loops around again. It's probably worth noting that our train conductor probably has some ulterior motives, right? But this is his spiel, essentially. Now we get into our first stage of grief, our first chapter that is kind of non-linear, as it were. So you are in denial. This can't be happening, and our gameplay loops, for the most part, follow the same structure, which you'll see in just a moment. So at the beginning of the day, you talk to the train conductor. He gives you some direction, some hint for the day. You go into what we call free roam 1, which is a casual lower stakes interaction. It's worth noting that you can only choose one person to talk to. You can't talk to the same person twice in one day. So for example, if you were to choose our Inquisitor Mindflayer Darius in free roam 1, you can't have a date with him in free roam 2. I know, I wish we had it all as well, but we simply cannot. So in free roam 1 is a casual interaction. It's probably a conversation or something just very low stakes. And then in free roam 2 is more like an event or a date of some kind. That's higher stakes, more chances for you to raise your attraction meters, more chances for you to raise your decay meters. Oh, that's reminded me. I need to explain what that is. So let's talk about, let's take a side quickly, my dear friends. So, as I've mentioned, this train is on its way to whatever place comes next, and this is a chance for people to resolve their unfinished business. But the more you don't resolve your business, the more you are decaying or have some sort of cosmic degradation. And now, but if you do lean into being authentic and vulnerable, you raise your attraction meters because you're really showing your true self to the characters, the other passengers on the train. And so in our gameplay, you have dialogue checks and choices that can raise your attraction meter, it can raise your decay meter, but we also have fun things where you can have unlockable dialogue as a result of having a high enough attraction meter, a high enough decay meter, or degradation meter, it's the same thing. And most importantly, if your degradation meter is high enough, it will block chances for you to raise your attraction meter, and that's very important to remember as well. Okay, so the sidebar done. So yes, we have free roam 1, free roam 2, chances for you to speak to our passengers. Worth noting that this is very much a tutorial chapter in that you kind of learn the motions, you get to know our characters, you get some chances to fuck up with them, right, in conversations, but they have no effect on your meters. So it's kind of okay to mess up a little bit in this, but you'll get some feedback at the end of the day in the form of a debrief by writing in your journal or having a reflective thought at the end of the day in your cabin. Then we get into the real stuff, the real action, which is what I'm calling an Act 2.2 of sorts. So we have anger, and it's the same thing again. You talk to the train conductor. You have a free roam 1, you have a free roam 2, and you have a debrief. The details are in the narrative task board, which goes through these scenes in much more detail, so don't worry about that for now. But this is the overall structure that you need to be concerned with. We then have bargaining, and as you can see, same structure again. We have depression, and then same structure again. The thing that I would really like to stress is that the events of the day, the conversations of the day, have to reflect where the characters are at in their minds, in the stages of grief. And so Vivi might be angry, frustrated, irritable, and other characters might be however that manifests for them during the anger stage. And in bargaining, maybe it's all about, oh, if I do this one thing, I can get off this train. And so it's really important to keep the themes of the loop or the day that you're in when you are writing, to stay true and focused to what the characters are going through because we are torturing them. Okay, so we get to acceptance. Now, there's some little flowchartiness here, so bear with me. We get to the acceptance stage, and this is where the game will look at if your attraction or your connection meter is high with any character. If yes, we have this sort of like scene from The Bachelor, kind of, where the corresponding characters will have a confession scene, and you can make a decision on whether you want to choose someone to be your romance partner. But it's important to note that you can stay friends. So let's go through the friendship endings. Now, there is a possibility that not you will not have raised your connection meter with all of our passengers, and so it might be that you are friends with one or two of our NPCs, but there's a third one which has a bad ending, the Eldritch ending. It is possible that you have a high enough attraction or connection meter with all of the passengers, in which there is a special ending, a super happy ending, friendship bonanza, which is nice. If you do go down the romance route and our character is monogamous in this stage, and so she will choose only one person to have a romantic ending with. We have a romance scene that unlocks. Now, this is roughly what it is. This may change a little bit, but the beats are the same. So you and the person you romance hold hands and look out the windows as you are both absorbed into the cosmic weave together. There's darkness and then a bright light, and you hear the train conductor sigh, "I'm a romantic fool." And you get to kind of have this really nice ending where you and the person that you've developed this relationship with can start again. Ending C, though, is if you have refused to behave in a way that resolves your unfinished business, you become an eldritch horror. Everyone else becomes an eldritch horror. It's terrible all around. You sit in the observatory and you turn your face to the sky as you are absorbed into the weave. Darkness, credits roll. We see an eldritch horror looking at the train at the distance. Uh-oh, it's you! So that's the main thrust of the story. Some things I would love for you to note is that we have this table, and it really is just to help us kind of get into Vivian's headspace. And so what we have here are the stages of grief. What we have here are questions or prompts. And I did some research in terms of what do these stages of grief normally look like, and what are some ways to move that people move past the stage, or recommended ways for people to move past these stages. And then you can see there are some notes about how our character Vivienne specifically behaves during the stage of grief and how Vivienne is able to move past the stage.